Welcome back to the best Fire Emblem Let's Play on the internet, presented by Don951 and Mekkah.
Hi.
And this is Chapter 4X, my Fire Emblem 5 Paragon Mode 0% Girls playthrough.
So Leaf thought that he had successfully escaped prison in the last chapter, but he just got himself into another one that's more dark and more dangerous. There is a huge line of enemy armor knights and mages waiting for him right ahead, 4 of each, and there's also a bunch of soldiers, so that makes this enemy phase very precarious, but thankfully Fergus is here to save the day.
You are correct in that Fergus is here to save the day, but he faces a substantial chance of death in doing so. This chapter is notorious for being one of the most bullshit in the game, and this enemy phase is going to be one of the least reliable in this playthrough. The reason for this is precisely because we have to not only survive, but also end up killing in some way or another all of the enemy mages and armor knights that lie in wait for us. And Fergus is the only one of our units who can reliably one-round KO armor knights, because he has access to the rapier, which has effective damage against armor knights, and 10 base critical, and that in conjunction with the extra 10 critical that he's receiving from his Karin support, gives him a guaranteed pursuit critical setup that lets them cut through their defenses. But Fergus is not very durable. He's borderline 2-hit KO'd by the armor knights depending on how much strength they roll, and he has no magic to speak of, so he basically is entirely reliant on dodging to survive.
You'd think Delshin would be very useful here, to shield other people and have high defense to block a bunch of attacks, but his defense is so high that the enemies do not want to attack him at all, and he's actually very bad against the mages. Instead the armor knights go for more enticing targets, and Delshin is once again rendered useless. Brighton is kind of good here because he has Wrath just like Orson, so whenever he counters he gets a critical hit, and that means he can KO some things, but he doesn't always double, and he also generally does not one-hit KO, so that is unfortunate and not very useful.
We position Lifis and Lara below Delshin and Fergus to hopefully draw some fire away from the enemy mages. Neither of the thieves are going to be fighting very much or at all in this chapter, so it's best to make use of what HP they have to ensure reliability of this first enemy phase. Now, Fergus has 7 HP, so he's technically easy pickings for any of the mages, but for some reason some of them still attack Lifis and Lara anyway. I'm not too familiar with the AI in this game, so I can't really explain the behavior, but it might have something to do with how much hit rate and how much critical they can pull on their targets. And this behavior is also not always consistent between resets, but I'm pretty limited in my options.
So now that the enemies have attacked us and we survived, we still need to get rid of a lot of them. We can do this with several interesting ways. Matua is actually kind of good against the mages because she doubles, and so she often one-rounds. Delshin can be kind of helpful because he has a chance to one-hit KO mages, but his battle axe is still very inaccurate, so that's not a very reliable option. Lifis can steal their tomes, which doesn't get rid of the mages themselves, but it makes them harmless. And Karin is also pretty good because her magic is pretty high, so even though she doesn't do a whole lot of damage, she's very safe.
So we got a pretty favorable stat spread among the enemy mages. Delshin and Matua could dispatch one each without requiring any other help, and Karin, wanting to prove that she's actually good at combat, gets a double critical on the mage that she was supposed to weaken, and destroys him completely, but that wasn't necessary because Brighton was supposed to get the kill anyway. So now that they've taken care of all of the enemies within our vision range, we only have to worry about 2 more enemies on this side of the map, hidden in the fog. One of them is a soldier over on the left. He's pretty weak and easy pickings, so we don't care about him that much. There's also one more armor knight left over that we didn't pull over on the previous enemy phase because we carefully kept everyone out of his range. And to take care of him, we had Fergus use a vulnerary to heal up, and we're offering up Lara for a free capture to occupy his enemy phase and to weaken him for when Fergus is ready to kill him in the next player phase.
Yeah, so not much left to do here in this section. You can see that a large bit of this dungeon is lighted up by all these NPC kids. Once again, we have some kids to free, but compared to in Chapter 4, it's actually very easy to do. Just open the door and they'll walk right out since the enemies are gone. These kids correspond to some houses in Chapter 6. If you do not free them, then if you visit those houses, the NPCs will just kind of tell you to fuck off. So we need to free them because we want their items.
It's actually kind of amusing how much disdain the NPCs will express from a player if he fails to save their kids. If you go to a village in Chapter 6, for example, some of them will be like, "Oh, my kid's been captured by the Empire and I'll never see him again. And you guys failed to save him. You call yourself a Liberation Army, get the hell out of here." And it really makes the player feel bad. So while we're on the topic of NPCs, we've got a couple of them roaming across the top of the map. They are a mage and his mentor Sage. The Sage's name is Sed. He's super powerful. He's the one seen here basically exploding the enemy in a gust of wind. And part of the reason why he's so powerful is because he has access to a personal tome, the Forseti tome, which in this chapter is not only unbreakable, it also has 20 might, 30 critical, and it gives plus 20s to both skill and speed. Obviously we're not going to be recruiting Sed. I wish we could, but that'd be way too overpowered at this point in the game. But we are going to recruit the mage, just following him around. His name is Asvel, and he can be recruited either by talking to him with Leaf, or better yet, after we open the door, he's going to make a beeline towards Leaf and recruit himself.
Asvel is the mage that I referred to last chapter as the very important character to recruit, because he comes with a very powerful Graph Caliber tome, which is another personal weapon in this game that's going to be very helpful towards killing enemies, just like Corsen's Buchi, because it has 1-2 range and high critical and high accuracy, and this one also hits on magic, so that makes it very useful at boss killing, which is great because we no longer have Avel to do that. The only bad thing about it, compared to other personal weapons, is that it only has 40 uses to their 60, so it runs out a lot faster, especially considering Asvel already wasted a couple of uses as an NPC, and there was no way for us to prevent that.
We have one more group of enemies to deal with who are locked in a room located on our way to the escape point in the top right hand corner of the map. And this group of enemies consists of soldiers and armor knights, but is headed by an enemy bishop with an Elfire tome. And this is kind of a dick move because Elfire hits like a truck, especially against all of our units with only 0 or 1 resistance. But thankfully we can make use of Sed even though we can't recruit him. We did a small rescue chain to plop him into that room, and that makes it so that all the enemies have no choice but to suicide on him and get exploded in a gust of wind. And this is about as high of a success rate as you can get when it comes to strategies in this game.
It's worth noting that this chapter has some very good treasure to get in the upper left corner, but unfortunately the straightest route to the escape tile once again doesn't lead us through that treasure, so we have to leave it there. There's a Brave Sword, which would have been very helpful if Fergus had B swords at this point. He doesn't, but he's going to hit it kind of soon. Brave Sword is light enough so that he could probably quadruple some enemies with it, and even if he didn't, it's very helpful for the purposes of capturing or just killing without taking a counter. It would have been very nice to have. There's also a life ring that we could use to further boost the durability of one of our units to make enemy phases more reliable. Like, I know there's going to be some very risky enemy phases later on where it would be very nice to have plus 7 HP. And there's also an Iron Blade, but that weapon sucks.
Yeah, the life ring would have been great for Asvel because a plus 7 HP would have really helped survivability in many instances throughout this playthrough, where he might avoid getting 1-hit KO'd or 2-hit KO'd. But we had to skip it because it's too far out of the way, and the life ring that we got in Chapter 1 is reserved for someone else. So we're going to be finishing up this map by scooting everyone out to the escape point, and the limiting factor to how quickly this map can be completed is the mobility of our least mobile units, which in this specific case is Dalshin, because he's bringing up the back of the pack. More mobile units such as Machua, Lithis, and Lara can afford to hang around back a bit more and perform tasks such as finishing off enemies or opening doors, and this is going to be a common theme throughout the indoor escape chapters. Karin talked to Sed to obtain the Sed Scroll, which is a very important item to obtain in playthroughs with growths, because it gives the holder plus 30% speed growth in addition to blocking critical hits. And this is particularly useful for Asvel because it gives him over 100% speed growth, and that would be especially useful in the upcoming maps, because Asvel is weighed down significantly by tomes, and in this game, tome weight is not mitigated by constitution. But because we don't have growths, we had to substitute it with the speed ring, and that's why we brought it to Chapter 4. Anyway, I'm glad that we got Chapter 4X over with. It's completed in 8 turns. We'll see you next time.
See ya, Sed.